Hi again, Walter Rauschenbusch, page 414. Christianity and the Social Crisis, the last chapter. What to do. The new apostolate. The first apostolate of Christianity, that is, mission of Christianity, was born from a deep fellow feeling for social misery and from the consciousness of a great historical opportunity. Jesus saw the peasantry of Galilee following him about with their poverty and their diseases, like shepherdless sheep that have been scattered and harried by beasts of prey, and his heart had compassion on them. He felt that the harvest was ripe, but there were few to reap it. Past history had come to its culmination, but there were few who understood the situation and were prepared to cope with it. He bade his disciples to pray for laborers for the harvest, and then made them answer their own prayers by sending them out, 2 by 2, to proclaim the kingdom of God. That was the beginning of the worldwide mission of Christianity. The situation is repeated on a vaster scale today. If Jesus stood today, amid our modern life, with that outlook on the condition of all humanity, which observation and travel and the press would spread before him, and with the same heart of divine humanity beating in him, he would create a new apostolate to meet the new needs in a new harvest time of history. To anyone who knows the sluggishness of humanity to good, the impregnable entrenchments of vested wrongs, and the long reaches of time needed from one milestone of progress to the next, the task of setting up a Christian social order in this modern world of ours seems like a fair and futile dream. Yet in fact, it is not one tithe as hopeless as when Jesus set out to do it. When he told his disciples, "You are the salt of the earth, you are the light of the world," he expressed the consciousness of a great historic mission to the whole of humanity. Yet it was a Nazarene carpenter speaking to a group of Galilean peasants and fishermen. Under the circumstances at that time, it was an utterance of the most daring faith. Faith in himself, faith in them, faith in what he was putting into them, faith in faith. Jesus failed and was crucified, first his body by his enemies and then his spirit by his friends. But that failure was so amazing a success that today it takes an effort on our part to realize that it required any faith on his part to inaugurate the kingdom of God and to send out his apostolate. Today, as Jesus looks out upon humanity, his spirit must leap to see the souls responsive to his call. They are sown broadcast through humanity, legions of them. The harvest field is no longer deserted. All about us we hear the clang of the whetstone and the rush of the blades through the grain and the shout of the reapers. With all our faults and our slothfulness, we modern men in many ways are more on a level with the real mind of Jesus than any generation that has gone before. Of course, he's speaking here about the great era and century of missions, the century in which he was born, the 19th century. If that first apostolate was able to remove mountains by the power of faith, such an apostolate as Christ could now summon might change the face of the earth. The apostolate of a new age must do the work of the sower. When the sower goes forth to sow his seed, he goes with the certainty of partial failure and the knowledge that a long time of patience and of hazard will intervene before he can hope to see the result of his work and his venture. In sowing the truth, a man may never see or trace the results. The more ideal his conceptions are, the farther they move ahead of his time, the larger will be the percentage of apparent failure. But he can afford to wait. The powers of life are on his side. He is like a man who has scattered his seed and then goes off to sleep by night and work by day, and all the while the seed, by the inscrutable chemistry of life, lays hold of the ingredients of its environment and builds them up to its own growth. The mustard seed becomes a tree. The leaven assimilates the meal by biological processes. The new life penetrates the old humanity and transforms it. Robert Owen was a sower. His cooperative communities failed. He was able to help only a small fraction of the working men of his day, but his moral enthusiasm and his ideas fertilized the finest and most self-sacrificing minds among the working classes. They cherished his ultimate hopes in private and worked for realizable ends in public. The Chartist movement was filled with his spirit. The most influential leaders of English unionism in its great period, after the middle of the 19th century were Owenites. The Rochdale Pioneers were under his influence in the great cooperative movement in England. An economic force of the first importance grew in some measure out of the seed which Owen had scattered. Other men may own the present. The future belongs to the sower, provided he scatters seed and does not mistake the chaff for it, which once was so essential to the seed and now is dead and useless. I'll put in a link to 4 videos interlinked on the parable of the sower and the next parable, the parable of the wheat and the weeds. They have to do, of course, more with the illusion of restorationists, including, of course, Jehovah's Witnesses, as to the fact that the labors of the sower in the parable, according to them, were pretty useless because the weeds completely took over the master's field. This is an illusion, of course, of those who don't really know either prophecy, parables, or the history of the church. So I'll put in a link to the first of those 4 videos on the sower and the wheat and the weeds. Was there a great apostasy that took over Christ's church? See you soon.